The Revenant was one of my favorite movies. Yet despite how much I loved it, I could never content myself with the simple fact that it was a story about First Nations trauma that made the vehicle for that experience a white settler. I know it was based on a real story, but it actually really wasn't, and the story they chose to tell instead was about First Nations trauma. There are other movies and shows that never had this issue. Smoke Signals, Reservation Dogs, and Rhymes for Young Ghouls are among those I've seen. And while I love them each for different reasons, the through line with these kinds of stories and their lovable and difficult mundanity is that they constructed a worldview in which First Nations peoples could only be protagonists of the mundane. Safely outside the realm of fantastical fiction, they inhabit our real world, America in the 70s, 80s, and today, with police officers and Indian agents and real grief. What's less remarkable than Prey being an incredible movie is that it's also incredible representation, not of a vague Indigenous, Native Americans, or First Nations allegory adapted to fit a setting where spaceships are more believable than the Comanche. This movie is about the Comanche. This film was released with a full-length dub in Comanche, because the movie was pitched to be entirely in Comanche, and while it's a shame that they were negotiated down to only the dub, it's still incredible that you can watch a movie in Comanche and it's not a docudrama or a period piece. It's the fucking Predator. And in the context of what came before, Prey makes a pretty strong bid to save the entire IP. Prey does have one major flaw that bothers me as a novice archer. You see this knock? The actors were trained on handling their bows with this knock by a consultant named Kevin Starblanket. As if it wasn't enough that he's a sociopathic, violent, power-tripping cop, now retired, whose favorite pastime was brutalizing Black and First Nations teenagers, this draw is... I don't have enough context to say that it was never used at all, but it was definitely never used by these people in this part of the world at this time. Much like the charges he pressed against the activist who told people about the things he did, Kevin made this shit up. There will always be some detail in media that takes someone out of it, and this is one for me. And because I can't watch this incredible film without thinking about how this quite substantial detail, considering how much archery is in the movie, was ruined by letting some asshole cop just make shit up and pass it off, I just want to pass on my curse. But the usual flaw in a Predator movie are the human protagonists that the audience spends the majority of the film in the perspective of. Prey sidesteps this issue by being good instead of bad. It establishes emotional stakes early on and throughout the movie, and it isn't desperate to concede any given moment to wit or irony. It's sincere. Even its references, what few there are, tread carefully between tying the film to the franchise and being appropriate in the moment without that context. That sincerity is not something the Predator franchise has ever had. The film consistently frames Naru's perspective. Without a whole cast of protagonists at every moment, it uses cinematography to communicate to the audience what Naru's seeing, and on rewatching it, you're likely to spot even more moments that are set up and paid off than you did the first time. It happens nearly every scene. Naru's strength as a character is her perception, and the film tells you that only after an hour spent showing you. The action scenes themselves are also incredible. I promise I didn't make the comparison to The Revenant just because there's a bear mauling and a great one-take fight, but when they both have them, and Prey didn't seem to require risking the safety of the crew to film in natural winter lighting, I'm gonna have a preference. The Yacha also doesn't have absolute dominance over every action scene in the film. There's a pacing to the fights. Contrast this against the prior films where the function of a Predator rampage scene is to communicate, again, hey, isn't this monster strong and scary? It is. It's just also boring. In Prey, the smallest quarry it hunts still manages to take its chunk of flesh. The humans it faces Even the ones which are meant to be fodder for its rampage are unusually cunning for the franchise, splitting up, landing blows, baiting it into traps that work, temporarily. During the climactic fight, after an entire movie of the Yacha slaughtering its quarry with the wrist blades, after seeing the most effective weapon against it be its own, Naru tricks it into severing its own arm. Prey isn't usually concerned with the fleshy details of its violence. The Yacha's kills take place out of frame, in the fore or background, or even with a cutaway. This isn't because the film is squeamish. It very firmly believes violence is cool, and it's hard to argue that it's wrong. Instead, it's because Prey uses violence to set and maintain its tone. Its kills are every bit as brutal, creative, and humorous as the franchise has had in the past, but the film and audience has nothing to gain by seeing every detail, but much to gain through the ways it chooses instead to portray them. The most common effect is a foreboding, as the emphasis is placed on an observer or an oblivious victim. While this is justification enough, I can't understate my own gratitude that the images of brutalized First Nations people are restrained as a consequence. There's enough of that in Hollywood already. But the reason I really wanted to talk about Prey is this. There's a scene early on. Naru's mother asks her why she wants to hunt, because she's good at so many other things, including the medicine she's been taught. She offers her mother. It's to prove herself against her tribe's expectations. Later on, after Naru's been injured, her mother gently chides her, telling her that to hunt is not a matter of pride or expectations, but survival. And while this is a dramatic stinger foreshadowing her confrontation with the Yacha, in the perspective of the character, it's a reiteration of their worldview and forms the central motif of the film, that to hunt is something done to secure food or for protection. In other words, survival. The other hunters in the film each oppose this philosophy in some manner. First, members of Naru's own tribe who view their status as hunters as a privilege and actively and misogynistically antagonize Naru. Second, the French fur trappers kill and skin the buffalo, leaving its meat behind to rot, both to eradicate the food source of First Nations tribes and to profit from the furs. Lastly, the Yacha, a literal trophy hunter whose only goal in its hunt is pride and violence. As the movie progresses, Naru goes from wanting to hunt as a matter of pride to fighting the Yacha for her life and the lives of her tribe. Naru suffers as First Nations people throughout history have suffered at the hands of those who hunt for pride, by being attacked, imprisoned, and having those close to her maimed and killed. Because Prey asks the purely hypothetical question. What if First Nations people were attacked by a technologically superior invader bent on their eradication, who hunted them for sport and trophies? The Yacha isn't just an action movie monster, and Prey isn't just a Predator film. The Predator is a colonizer because Prey is a film about First Nations trauma. But, one by one, every hunter who sows cruelty and suffering is punished by the narrative. Because Prey isn't just a Predator film. The Predator gets its fucking head cut off. Because Prey's a film about First Nations survival. Thanks for watching.